So I'm Amy Wilkinson. I'm the founder CEO of a company called Ingenuity, and I teach at Stanford Business School. I have the great pleasure of introducing two of Germany's top women, and I'm going to give you a tiny bit about their background and then ask them to also describe a little more in depth. So I'll start with Claudia. You are now executive member of the board of Deutsche Telekom, have in the past been running the German operations, now I'm sorry?
The non-German European.
Oh, European, non-German operations, now technology and innovation. But can you tell us a little bit more about that? And for 17 years, she was a leader of the technology practice at McKinsey in strategy consulting. So tell us a little bit more.
So actually, I've the pleasure to run the technology and innovation operations, which is actually the networks. Normally, when you say this, you should say, whoever has a problem with a traffic hole or something, come to me, right? So I'm running technology and IT and innovation. And I must say, the biggest task right now is, for instance, in 2017, we started the largest network modernization in the mobile and in the fixed line business, as well as the largest fiber rollout ever in the history of Deutsche Telekom. So in short, what I'm doing now.
Amazing. And then Katrin, so you are state secretary, right?
Yes.
At the Federal Ministry of Defense. And in that, you have responsibilities for procurement, for cybersecurity, for technology. You were also at McKinsey for a number of years. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Well, the background, as you said it, 15 years with McKinsey, and most of the time together with Claudia running technology and public sector projects. And then three and a half years ago, I got a call whether I would change sides. So that's what I did. I'm now a civil servant and within the public sector, and I run basically the procurement organization. And if you ask about our challenges, well, it is digitalization, back and forth with the positive sides of it, but also if you take the other side of the medal, like cyber, as you can imagine, cybersecurity is one of our biggest challenges and keeps me awake at night.
So I was also at McKinsey out of San Francisco and London, and one of the things about the firm is that they teach you have an obligation to dissent. You have to speak your mind, you have to come with a point of view. So we're going to try to make this an interesting and provocative conversation. I want to start by highlighting the fact that both of these women are physicists originally and are problem solvers, and I want to ask you how that background sort of informs your career.
Actually, I must say my father was a physicist too, and when I was a kid, he said to me, when you run against a wall 1 trillion times, you might eventually pass through. Now, he didn't mean that as a source of inspiration for getting a bloody nose, Katrin, but he meant it as a source of inspiration to think about things not in traditional wisdom, because in classical physics you don't go through the wall, I mean, unless you are Harry Potter, but in quantum mechanics, little particles can do. So what it did for me, actually, when I was a teenager already, and we talked about this a lot, Katrin, I always wanted to go to the bottom, to the root of things, and really understand things, right? You don't get afraid of trying to understand things which are not really plausible at first glance, right?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have a similar background. By the way, my father was also a physicist, so I think it's a good correlation to go into physics if you have a father in physics, as a woman. Anyway, what I wanted to say is, and if I may steal back my sentence, is there is one sentence which has basically guided me through, and this is from Marie Curie, and she said, there's nothing in life to be afraid of, only to be understood. And this is something which I had it as a big sign on the back of my table, because I think this is actually understanding things then takes the fear out of it, and you can solve them. And most problems of today's world, if we get our head together, if we bring the best people to the job, if we take our time, we can actually solve the problem. Mm-hmm. I believe in that. Yes, there are some irrational moves around. Not so easy, we have to deal with them, but I truly believe in problem solving as also a leadership principle.
So now you're leading in very complex and large organizations. Can you talk about the challenges? of large-scale organizations?
So on principle, I would say you need to be very sensitive towards external vibrations, and at the same time not to be too sensitive to it. What do I mean? When I look here at our situations, there are many different stakeholders to be looked at. First of all, of course, the customer and customer feedback, politicians, media, our own employees, of course, and the capital markets and the shareholders. And bringing that together, specifically shorter and longer-term aspirations, is not necessarily easy. Practically speaking, if we would act like a private company, we would probably invest most of our money only in the United States, because the market is more attractive. 4 operators for 200 million people, in Europe 200 for 300 million people. But of course, being Deutsche Telekom, this is not what we are doing, right? Because in the end, we see that we have also the duty to really drive down connectivity and broadband in Germany and in the European countries. Yeah, and this is why we are having this huge fiber rollout and network modernization. But in the end, you have to find a good way to deal with the target conflicts. And I would say a personal word around it is when you do this, you should not on a daily basis get nervous what is actually written about the management team and yourself about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Because if you do this, I think you fail. Yeah? So you have to do it somehow centered, but sensitive enough towards what's around you.
Large-scale organizations. I think obviously the biggest thing is how to move the ship, the tank. I mean, you don't have speedboats. We're trying to create speedboats. We now have a cyber innovation hub. We do something with the university here in Munich. We try to have speedboats, but in the end, it is a tank in the double sense of it in my job, I guess. So, and somehow the question is, how do you move it with all the boundary conditions? And you mentioned them, mine are a bit different. So my supervisory board, for example, is the parliament, so there are some slight differences, but in the end we have stakeholders all around, media, employees and so on, and the question is how to move it without getting stuck. On a personal base, without being blown up or just get stuck because you think, oh, I don't know how to move that tank, or without, in the change process. You have to try to bring the people together to make it happen, but it's damn hard work, I would say.
So give us a sense for the size that you're managing. So we talked a little bit about numbers, but try to,
Yes. So we roughly have 200,000 people. If I may translate, we have a worldwide operation. So we have offices, if you want, if I try to translate it, and field services in countries which are usually not that well equipped with infrastructure. So we operate own satellites, we operate several thousand vehicles, we have aircrafts, we have everything. So basically we are a huge organization. We have 5 hospitals, we have 2 universities, and we spend roughly 35 billion each year. And half of it on equipment, and this is basically what I do, so I go shopping. So
this is not small potatoes.
If I may translate it. So.
Right. So many leaders fail, right, at transforming large organizations or moving the needle. What do you think about in order to be successful going forward? When you look at 2018 and into the future, how do you avoid mistakes?
So I think, on a personal remark, you should avoid the mistake of illusion of perfect control and illusion of perfect omnipotence. Yeah, because in the end, in such complex systems, you can only succeed if you have the right mechanisms of people in place who speak up and who uphold, and you said that the obligation to dissent. And to give you a practical example, we had a while ago an IT roadmap, all traffic lights green, like in big IT projects. But in reality, it actually ran against the wall. It was a big mess, in spite of all the green traffic lights, yeah? And the main thing what we figured out, it was just over-administered it. We had thousands of pages describing what specific specifications people should deliver in the year 2019. Yeah? And in order to fix that, you actually have to give up certain over-administrative controlling mechanisms and at the same time delegate problem-solving accountability where it belongs to, where people can actually judge that. So I think that is one common mistake.
Okay.
Oh, again, very difficult to prioritize my answer here. Maybe first thing I have to say on the boundary conditions, yesterday was an important day, but we don't really know what's going to happen. So I don't know how the future will be in that respective. But if I think how to solve the challenge, and this is also part of the reason why I said yes to come here, is we as the public sector, we as public sector institutions, we will not be able to solve all our problems alone. So if we all try to run for the best people, for the brightest people, for the new ideas in digitalization, obviously the private sector, you guys can pay more and you can earn more. So why should people try to solve our problems? And the only thing I can say is if we don't solve the problems we have in the public sector, if we don't solve cyber, if we don't solve the security issues, we all have a problem. So part of being here is it's a pitch. So please, if you think about your next engagement, so maybe you can think how we can solve our problems together. And we have truly interesting problems to solve.
Yes,
so.
and Katrin, now we do the super pitch. For everyone here who listens to us, whoever likes to solve big, complex problems with people who love speaking up and rebels, you either go to the Verteidigungsministerium, Ministry of Defense, or to Deutsche Telekom Technology and Innovation. Chaka, yeah? So guys, just as you know, yeah?
Bravo, bravo.
So that's our hidden agenda here, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
To get
Not
it
very
clear.
hidden. What about working at the intersection of business and government? So you are obviously both out of the private sector. You have quite a lot of intersection with government, or you're in government. You know, what are the keys to making that successful at that intersection?
Yeah.
Okay, I try it. I think first of all is obviously be aware in which system you are and what are the system boundaries. I think this is one very important point. And the other thing is look at the strengths we have, which is always good, right? And the ones we have in public sector, I think, which are very different is the problems we are solving, and there is a bit of a difference to a company looking at EBIT margin. So we're trying to solve problems which influence everyday's life of the people who live in a country, and trying to appeal to that. And I think it's very important because I cannot pay a lot to people. I cannot give extra money. I don't even have targets for most of the people. So I mean, we have civil servants, and we're trying to run the country with all the means we have. And I think appealing to what is different to a company, to appealing to actually why people are there. Not all of them. We know this had also something to do with risk averseness. But this is, I think, one important thing to make it work, and also to convince other people to work with us. And I know we're not easy to deal with sometimes. Bureaucracy is high. I know all of this. But I think, coming back to what I said before, we can only solve the problems together, especially if we look at digitalization, cyber, artificial intelligence. And we can only solve these problems if various disciplines, private and public sector, come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I would say, Katrin, for both sides, understanding time horizon and mandate of action and incentives for action, or maybe I should say what drives action, yeah, is mission critical, because otherwise businesses often assess government actions in the wrong way, because you ask yourself maybe, oh, that's fantastically logical, why don't we just do that, right? Or also vice versa. And I think no business nowadays can ignore public social responsibility and can afford not having a meaningful dialogue, and we do have, right, between those who define political rules and those who run the business. So I think there's actually a need for much more meaningful, overarching dialogue to get things done.
So you both have very important positions of leadership. Would your careers have been possible 40 years ago, especially as leading women?
Simple answer is no. What many people might not know, but in Germany, up until 1977, which is 40 years ago, formally, a female person could not do a job, an independent job, without the formal permission of her husband. Right? So formally, not that everyone did it like this. And that law, the Bürgerliche Gesetzbuch, was only abolished in 1977. And when I joined the board of Deutsche Telekom in 2011, there were less than 10 women in any executive board of any DAX company. And for you, it's probably even much more so, right, Katrin?
Yeah, I think there's the church left and there's football, soccer left. But I think most of the other domains by now have women have entered.
Church.
So, no, no, of course this would have not been possible. It was simply not, and you can take probably any part of my bio, right? And there was been not a fitting with that role. But I think it's showing. Of course, it's also because my minister, appointed me and said, yes, of course, why not? And she is the first female defense minister in Germany also. So I think there was a bit of a role model. And by the way, this is an important point. And Claudia, who joined McKinsey before me, also eased the past there. And I think this is very important that we think about where to drive the change and that we stick together. This is also part of DLD, right? Connecting the dots and also bringing people together and try to help each other on our ways forward.
So what do you think has made you successful in these roles? As you've come up your career, obviously helping each other, connecting the dots,
absolutely.
And the world's shifting.
I would say lack of fear. Yeah, somehow, right? Coming back to, she's laughing. Yeah, we know each other. So coming back to this, and that reminds me of my first day in the physics class in 1988 at the Cologne University of Physics, and we had theoretical physics class, and literally hardly anyone, including myself, and all my otherwise male colleagues, because I was the only female human being in theoretical physics, but literally, we didn't understand what the professor was talking about. Yeah, we really didn't understand. And I think that helps you when you have a number of people who go through that experience and who help each other, that really helps you not to be afraid. And by the way, not to be afraid of doing a thing and understanding a thing, not by just trivializing it and saying, oh, I'm shying away from the problem, it's too complicated, I don't want, but really by going into the eye of the tiger, into the middle of the storm, really going into this and not being afraid, right?
No, I think I love the idea, and I think it's right, and maybe to build on it, it's a bit the independence.
Yeah.
You know, if push comes to shove, then, well, I just go home. Right? I have a wonderful wife, I have 3 children, I just go home, right? And this independence drives you into doing the right things and not because you think you have to do that or that and so on. And I think this is very important to be independent. And then maybe I add one thing, and this is try to not lose your humor, because I think it's one of the most important things, right? Otherwise you go crazy. So maybe that one.
So both of you have children, and I know you have a unique relationship there with your kids as godparents to the others' children. What do you think is the skill set for the future? What are you trying to teach your kids about managing in a more global world and a technology-accelerated world?
I'm not trying to teach my kid to manage in a global world, anything, So, honestly, I strongly believe, I have to say, in the autonomy of the individual. And I strongly believe that as a parent, you should really avoid to put a frame on your kids. And I was actually lucky to have a father and a great father who always extended that for me. So I strongly try to make sure that my kids can actually do what they are passionate about. I really believe. If my daughter was now sitting here, she would probably disagree with some of the statements, but I'm really working hard to somehow, if anything, foster the curiosity. You know, I would say the grass doesn't grow faster when you pull, right? You can just prevent the grass from growing when you do this. So I try not to do this. I really try to give space and make sure that they discover their passion. By the way, apart from this, as I'm a passionate physicist, I tend to get my kids on the nerves with doing experiments at the weekend. But just Mama likes it so much, and they like to do something with myself, so we all have to do it, right?
I know that feeling. I don't know, and I think you're doing a wonderful job with your two kids. I don't know the answer to your question. Sometimes I think I try to survive, to bring everything together, and that we stick together and manage with the challenges. But I think the thing which is most important to me or to us is to show them respect. Mm-hmm. Respect for every human being, respect for everything that's just going on, and I think it's one of the most important values. And then I don't look so much as this global digital world. I think reading books, right? Going back to the good old values. Not everything has been bad in the good old analog world, and I think respect and a bit of culture hopefully helps also in the global world.
Okay, so both of you manage innovation at large companies. I'm from Silicon Valley. I wrote an entrepreneurship book. I'm curious your view of entrepreneurship in your organizations, or pushing innovation and pushing that curve.
You go first.
So, of course, you need rebellious people from inside, but you need to make sure that you create space, because otherwise the antibodies of the large organization kills them before they even started. What I figured out what works well is, if you want to try something real radical, do not start necessarily at the center. So in our case, it means, for example, Bonn. Very radical concepts on technology, I tried first in smaller countries, like Macedonia or Croatia or Slovakia. And then, when it worked there, the technicians would say, might not be too bad. And then you scale it into the larger organizations. So basically proof that it's working. And the good thing about most technicians is they have a Werkstolz, a pride in things that work nicely. So if you can prove that, it starts going, yeah? But I wouldn't have the silver bullet answer to this. I was just realizing, Katrin, that this is a thing that works.
I don't know. I think it's extremely difficult, especially in an organization like we have it, which by design has an element of constant and not too much change, right? Because, I mean, when we're running field operations, you can't just invent what's going on there. So the organization in itself, and also coming out of this peace dividend time, as we tell it, right? So now we live in completely different security world as we lived 3, 4, 5 years ago. So how to bring innovation? And we are aware that without innovation, we have a major problem. And running out of business for us means a real catastrophe, right? Because technology has always been the innovator in the battlefield, so to say. And the question is how to bring it into the company. We experienced over the last years with modern or new stuff and innovation hub, I said it before, with the university. So I think there are little plans. My biggest challenge, and I don't have the answer yet, is how to bring it back to the main company, how to scale it, and how to bring it to the 150,000 soldiers. And that one, in the speed, with the system boundaries we have, while others, like in other countries, and take North Korea or take others, they work under different boundary conditions, and innovation there runs differently. So for me, I haven't found the answer, to be honest, but I hope there are innovative people who will find answers and then help us again.
So last question here. We're in a new year. Looking forward into 2018, what are you hopeful for? What are you expecting to happen in 2018?
So on politics, I hope we get a powerful government running. Yeah, really. For our business, of course, I look forward to even accelerating the broadband 5G build up and bringing new innovations which are relevant for the customers. On culture, for my own organization and the team would say, if I get even more successful on this topic of having people with the obligation to dissent, yeah, people who love to speak up, people who drive things forward, yeah, and my promise is that I will not stand in the way, but rather see myself as the one who makes sure that nobody is stamping on the grass.
Well, obviously, out of the role, it has something to do with security. And I said it before, sometimes I cannot sleep at night because of cyber and other topics. And I have to say, now in that role, it really keeps me awake at night because of the security problems. Currently, it seems a bit more quiet, but I do hope that 2018 we hopefully don't see major attacks, of course. I hope that we get the security situation stabilized, and I hope that the Bundeswehr, under a new stable government, which we hopefully will have soon, continue with the turnarounds. We started several turnarounds over the last 3 years. The minister did that, and we hope that we can continue with that, not because out of transformation of large-scale institutions is fun, but because of the security situation out there. And this is what I hope that we continue with that, hopefully.
All right, well, it's my great honor to be able to ask some questions and learn a little bit from these two phenomenal leaders, and please help me thank them.
Ja, danke. Vielen Dank.